side story. Why so? It's a bit strange when you look at kilometers and the presence of France over the world. French borders are 3,000 kilometers long when we speak only of the metropolitan territory, but 12,000 kilometers long if you take all of the French overseas territory, and knowing that France is the second biggest country after the US in terms of ownership of maritime territory, that makes a whole deal of border issues possibly concerning that country. So it's a bit contradictory to speak of a side story, but it is a side story because for most French people, borders are a non-issue. And border scholars are a minority and they have problems addressing border issues, especially in terms of policy. So I won't go into the details of every one of the findings out of the 6 lenses of BIG, because there's a book doing this, so I just wanted to insist on a few points that express the problematics of border studies and border analysis in France. So for this project, we have been working with one main policy partner, public policy partner, which is the Mission Opérationnelle Transfrontalière, cross-border operational mission. We had a policy forum with them at the National Assembly, and they do a lot. And why them and what is their status will tell you a lot about how borders are considered in France. They are an independent body that has a status of an independent association, but are funded by public money. They are cross-sectoral, and they are interesting because they are cross-sectoral, and they are basically funded by the public national entities, the equivalent of a federal entity, and they service all of the border communities, providing them counseling, public counseling on how to deal about cross-border covenants, hospitals, etc., etc. And there are examples of very successful projects that they have been promoting, i.e., their best number one example of success is a cross-border hospital at the border, one of the mountainous borders between France and Spain, which is a remote community, rural, and they managed to do one only hospital on both sides, and they are very proud of it. There's many criticism too to this hospital, but this is one of the things they do. And apart from this, borders are managed at local level, regional level, but when you're in Paris, it's not a big deal, except there is actually an ambassador to borders. I discovered this throughout the process. The ambassador to borders is somebody who has to deal with all of the materiality of the border, maintaining border marks in shape, dealing about electrical lines that will cross the border, and dealing with all of the demarcation issues, which are actually dealt with at the level of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs thus. So the usual story about borders is that one. Assembling puzzles, pieces of a puzzle. So 1 minute waste of time that I'm using to show you this, but it's actually quite interesting in many ways. As you can see, there's bits that come up and out, in and out since the modern era. It basically deals with, there's some holes that appear, there are enclaves that will then get rid of. And this basically concerns the eastern and northern borders. Nothing much happens on the southern border, which appears to be quite stable. And generally, when the French people are being asked about their nation state, this is what they talk about. And there's this parenthesis of the Napoleonic attempt to grow much bigger. But apart from this, you can see that from the past 5 centuries, French territory has remained quite stable, although there are ultimate little changes up to 1947 here or there that I will mention. Okay? So, in fact, the little video is about those changes. But they totally obviate what has happened before, which is a longer consolidation. What they show is France has been a centralized country and a consolidated territory for quite a long time. What they also totally obviate is that, in fact, if France has a lot of maritime territory today, it is because French borders have also developed all over the world. This is an interesting map because it's an anachronical map of all the bits of empire that France has held over the centuries. So some of these bits hold, with the borders that, for example, the biggest border of France today is the border that is outside of European territory, not EU territory, but European as a continent. It's the border between France and Brazil. That's over 700 kilometers. And all of these spaces do influence French politics on board, especially, for example, control over the Antarctic land and pretensions to global governance. Because for the sake of time, I don't have a lot of time, I'm just using the small little last bit that was incorporated to the French metropolitan territory, which, if you remember, came here. It's actually not on that map, but it's here. It's the border with Italy, and it's actually a place that is very holding and condensing today a lot of the French issues about borders. It is the Royal Valley, which is a little bit of French territory that is contiguous with the rest of France, but it is only accessible, but it is contiguous through mountains. If you want to go there through road, the normal way, like with your car and not walking through the mountains, you have to go through Italy and back into France again. So it's a very special place, and it has become a hotspot for the migration management in the recent moment. It's close to the city of Nice. Nice being very close to the border, but not a metropolis that has gained the status of cross-border European metropolis. There are only 2 cities in France that are governed through this status. Out of the 22 urban areas, 2, Strasbourg and Lille, have the status of Eurométropole, Eurometropolis, where the cross-border component is very important. So here you see it's a little drawing of the the demarcation of the borders. Lots of things go through, trains, goods, etc. It's also a binational conservation area that works on the basis of very many agreements. So there's a lot of cross-border cooperation, European funding, and there's also, but it has become a place of humanitarian crisis. And where the conflict between safety, security is also very expressed in a very intense manner, because instead of only having the border here secured by the usual police aux frontières, the people who are supposed to the border agents, they are sending now military people, counterterrorism state agents to deal with, and they do the same all along the Franco-Italian border, which was a totally benign border until the past 3 years, and has become a real problematic place. And there's conflict of governance there, because you have the counter-security, counter-terrorism guys with the huge armed equipment there to fighting migration, and a whole mobilization too of local societies that had not been used at all to this kind of antagonistic border culture. So there's a condensation there of all that we have been studying through the bridge project, and we are really thankful that it came, because up to now there had not been an extensive analysis of all of these French borders for a long period. So it's also a renewal of knowledge in very many domains. I think I will remain here for the sake of time. I think it was sometimes much too short, so I've seen some of my colleagues who know the situation go like, because it's a bit of a challenge to be so short. I stop here. Thank you very much.